Welcome to the 49th episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. Today we are doing a preview episode for UFC 269. After that, we are going to be taking a look back at last week's fight card, which was headlined by Jose Aldo and Rob Font. Because we missed that episode on Sunday, I want to make sure we touch on it. But before we get into that, like I said, we're going to go in depth here on all of these fights from UFC 269, and we are obviously going to start at the main event, which is Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier. For me, this is one of the toughest fights to predict, not only on this card, but when you look at all the fights that I've talked about on this card, I truly believe this is one of the toughest to pick. The reasoning for that is both these guys are so good, and they're equally matched in a lot of areas, and they each have strengths that really can work to cancel out each other's strengths. What I mean by that is Dustin is so strong, and I think he'll be able to stop some of the takedown attempts of Charles Oliveira. On the other hand, if Charles can get it to the ground, I think he can do some real damage. And on the feet, I think Charles is a little bit longer, which can cause Dustin some problems. He's got really good technique, but Dustin is such a brawler. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, because Dustin Poirier still has great technique and great skill, but he can turn a fight into a war. And I think for a lot of those reasons, I think these two cancel each other out, and I struggle picking between the two. But before I give a pick, I would like to say that I don't really believe this narrative that a lot of people have, that Charles Oliveira is a quitter. This has been something that has been mulling around for probably about a year now, where Charles Oliveira will quit if you drag him into the deep waters. I think that is inaccurate for two reasons. The first reason being, if you look at the Michael Chandler fight, just looking at that fight with Michael Chandler, he gets dropped early, and he not only gets dropped, but he fights out of getting dropped and doesn't get finished. And then coming back into the second round, where all of the momentum was for Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira does not quit. He finds an early knockout in that second round. That would have been such an easy fight to quit in after you get dropped for the first time. The other reason is we haven't seen a quit from Charles Oliveira in a long period of time. Several years ago, the idea that Charles Oliveira would quit when things got tough could be an acceptable critique. I think that has faded as we go each fight without seeing that issue reemerge. And not only to go with that, in order to make Charles Oliveira quit, you have to put him in serious trouble, which is something not many fighters can do. Looking at the fight with Chandler, didn't get past 2 rounds, so it's very hard to drag him in the 4th and 5th round where people say he will quit. Even in that fight, like I said, he never quit. Other fights with, for example, the Tony fight, he really controlled all that fight and didn't give Tony an opportunity to turn that fight into a war. Tony Ferguson can make a fight a war as well, and he never gave him that opportunity. If you look at Kevin Lee, he really I haven't watched that fight in a long time, so I don't want to say dominate, but he was controlling that fight, and then he eventually finds a submission. So when we've gone such a long time without Charles Oliveira getting tested in those deep waters, it's hard to say that he'll quit when he gets there, when we haven't seen him in a 4th or 5th round, especially this newer version of Charles Oliveira. And for that reason, I don't even factor Charles Oliveira quitting when it comes to predicting this fight. Now, the actual X's and O's and how I think this fight is going to go, I'm also conflicted because I think that if it gets to the ground, especially early, Charles Oliveira will be able to find a submission. Now, with that being said, I think Dustin Poirier is a very good wrestler and could very possibly prevent Charles Oliveira from getting this on the ground. And I also, I think that in itself would really hinder the, obviously that would hinder Charles's ground game, but it would be interesting because that would result in a pretty much striking battle. And in theory, Dustin Poirier is the better striker between these two. However, I would also say that in theory, Michael Chandler is a better striker than Charles Oliveira, and Charles Oliveira was able to find the knockout there. And Michael Chandler, as we've seen, is a very tough guy that will get in wars. And with that being said, how much is the threat of the takedown going to affect Dustin Poirier's striking? Because I think there will always be this fact that I am facing one of the best grapplers in the world. You know, let's not let this get onto the ground. I'll have problems there. So I wonder if that could result in Dustin Poirier pulling back a little bit in the hopes of the fight staying standing. And there's a good chance that Charles Oliveira could find some shots that could stun Dustin. I don't know if he has the ability to knock Dustin out. Once again, at the same time, I wouldn't predict Oliveira to knock Chandler out. Now, my prediction for this fight is I'm going to go with Charles Oliveira by decision. And my reasoning behind this, first of all, I have picked against Charles Oliveira since I want to say going all the way back to Kevin Lee. I definitely picked Kevin Lee to beat him. I'm pretty sure I picked Tony Ferguson to beat him. And if I remember correctly, I picked Michael Chandler, but I think that one, I was looking at that to be competitive, and Michael Chandler kind of edge out a win. So I've doubted Charles Oliveira. And for me, picking Charles Oliveira and him losing, so be it. But I'm going to feel like a real idiot if I pick Charles Oliveira and Dustin wins, because it's going to be one of those things where I should have known better. And not only that, but I think the X's and O's are going to end up playing in Charles Oliveira's favor. I think Charles Oliveira has a really underrated striking, and I think that he'll be able to balance his game well enough to where he can incorporate his tremendous grappling with his high-quality striking. And one of the big things that led me to picking Oliveira was when I realized that he was a little bit taller than Poirier. Usually those things don't really change my mind when I'm picking a fight. I shouldn't say change my mind, but affect my opinion, rather, when I'm picking a fight, unless it's a massive size difference. For example, Sean O'Malley in early in the Pavia. That size factor is going to play a big role there. But Charles Oliveira isn't that much taller than Dustin Poirier. But I think that will help him stay on the outside a little bit, and it will help him use a jab, which I think he needs to do if he wants to win this. And but in overall summary, I've got Charles Oliveira by a decision. And I think this is going to play out. I think it's going to be close. I think it's, it could be a 3-2. I think Oliveira is going to have some moments where he gets the fight on the ground a couple times and gets some control time. I think there's going to be some times where he's winning some striking exchanges, and that leads him to picking up enough rounds to win. But at the same time, I think Dustin Poirier is still a tremendous fighter, and I think he is good enough to go out there and, at least pick up 2 rounds here where he's really flowing and landing some good shots. So that is my prediction as of now. Charles Oliveira by decision. Now, Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena. This was a fight that I am way more interested in now in comparison to, let's say, 3 days ago. I didn't expect there to be bad blood in this fight. I was surprised that Juliana Pena was coming after Amanda Nunes at the press conference. And before we even get into the fight itself, the press conference, Juliana Pena, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that some of the things, I don't want to say ridiculous, but Amanda Nunes, I'll just say I'm taking Nunes aside on that little verbal war because, you can't really, if you're Pena, you can't really diss Amanda Nunes for accepting a fight with Ronda Rousey. At that time, many people still considered her to be the greatest women's fighter of all time. Legacy was tainted after the Holly Holm loss, obviously, but that's a major opportunity for Amanda Nunes. And, for Juliana Pena, if Juliana Pena was given that same decision, I bet she picks to fight Rousey instead of Nunes, especially if, you don't consider belts and if you take it back to that time period. Now it would probably be a different discussion because Nunes is the undisputed GOAT, but, it doesn't really make sense. And meanwhile, Pena said that Nunes was fighting cans when she beat Jermaine Durand, when Nunes, that is, beat Jermaine Durand, who submitted Juliana Pena. So it's like things aren't really adding up. Nunes fought Shevchenko. Doesn't really add up, the claim of fighting cans. Now, when I'm looking at this fight, my thought process is, obviously Amanda Nunes is going to win. The biggest thing that I've been mulling over is how and when is she going to win this fight. And I could see a knockout. I could see a submission. I wouldn't be surprised if Juliana Pena tries to take Amanda down. And if she is able to take her down, Amanda's jiu-jitsu is good enough to where working off her back, she could catch a submission. She could catch her submission in transition. She could catch a submission. She could catch a guillotine while Pena is attempting a takedown. And that's even if the fight gets to that point. Sorry about that. But I think Nunes wins, and I'm gonna go by submission. We're gonna take the risky one. We're gonna go Nunes submission in the first round. Now, moving on, Geoff Neal and Santiago Ponzinibio. This is an example of tremendous matchmaking. I think this fight makes a lot of sense, and I'm leaning Santiago Ponzinibio, and it's really less to do with the X's and O's and who I think is a better fighter. Geoff Neal, has a lot of things going his way in this fight. He's fought Wonderboy, and he's been in there with some very talented guys, and I think the experience is going to lean towards Geoff Neal. And I know, obviously, Ponzinibio has a lot more fights, but I think there's something to be said for fighting some of the competition that Geoff Neal has fought. You can learn a lot more in a fight against Wonderboy or Neil Magny than you can against let's look at, Ponzinibio beat Neil Magny too. I forgot about that. My bad. That was in 2018. But outside of Neil Magny, Mike Perry, Gunnar Nelson, there wasn't much there. Miguel Baeza, who was a younger prospect, tremendous win. I'm not trying to discredit that win, but in terms of fighting tougher competition, I would probably give it to Geoff Neal. But in the overall fight, I lean Santiago Ponzinibio. I think that he is starting to get in his flow again. He was out for a long period of time, and I think it takes a minute to get back in. I know people say ring rust isn't real, but if you look at Dominick Cruz has always said ring rust isn't real if you take the proper preparation. Santiago Ponzinibio is in a position where when he was out, he was sick very badly, so he couldn't really prepare the proper way just because he wasn't able to. At least that is my understanding of his illness. I could be wrong on that. But, and then if you look at Jeff Neal, not to bring up unfortunate events, but Jeff Neal was arrested 2 weeks ago and got a DUI. Now, I don't know all the details of that, but I feel like that hurts him, obviously, for two different reasons. The first reason being, you're out drinking 2 weeks before a fight. Probably not the best idea. On the other hand, that adds a lot of distractions and a lot of stress in your life leading into a big fight where you are you're the third in terms of priority. And I know it wasn't originally going to be there, but Jeff Neal is probably under a lot of stress, and I think that goes against him in this fight. So I'm picking Santiago Ponzinibio to win this fight by KO, let's say round 2. Now, another very interesting fight. We've got KaraFrance versus Cody Garbrandt. And this is Cody Garbrandt's move to 125 pounds. I don't suspect that move, dropping a weight class from 135 to 125, is really going to be an issue at all here. If you look at Cody, he has never been particularly big at 135 pounds. He has said before that he could move down to 125 pounds. Now he has finally done it. He made weight. He looked good. He got a nutritionist. And a lot of times, that nutritionist can play a big role in terms, obviously in making weight. But when you go to having to make 35 with no nutritionist to 25 with a nutritionist, that nutritionist could put him in better shape in comparison to what he was at 135, just because he cleaned up his diet so much. I don't know what his diet was before, obviously. So if Cody had a clean diet and then brought in a nutritionist, not going to be as big of a change. But if he had a terrible diet, brings in a nutritionist, I imagine there's going to be a big effect. So now that that's out of the way, like I said, weight cut, not even taking that into consideration. Looking at the X's and O's, KaraFrance versus Cody Garbrandt. The one major flaw that will always be brought up in a Cody Garbrandt fight is his chin. Now, I am really intrigued as to what is this chin going to look like. Because if you look back to some previous fights, right? Pedro Munhoz, TJ Dillashaw, Garbrandt gets hit and he gets in a war. He starts throwing. The opponent finds a chin, puts him down. That's it. And at the same time, if you look at the Rob Font fight, he got hit a couple times. I don't think that fight was ever a war necessarily, but he was getting hit. Now, where that comes into play, I think KaraFrance is going to be able to make this a high-paced war. And I think that is going to hurt Cody Garbrandt in the long run. I don't think that, I think, okay, let me rephrase this. I think KaraFrance is going to be able to land, and I think that he will be able to eat a Cody Garbrandt shot, whether that means he gets dropped and gets back up. I think he will be able to withstand some of those punches and create a brawl, and I think KaraFrance in a brawl KaraFrance can make a fight dirty, can make a fight, can make opponents expose themselves. He did it against Bonjarine. I think he will be able to do it against Cody Garbrandt. So I'm picking KaraFrance by knockout, and let's say round 2. I hate picking first round knockouts because I feel like picking a first round knockouts is like saying someone's going to walk up there, land a shot, and it's going to be a 15-second, it's over. I think there'll be a feeling out. I think the first round will set the pace for the fight, and then the second round he puts them away when they're both in big exchanges. Moving on, one of the most exciting fights on the card, Sean O'Malley and Helena Paiva. Now, Sean O'Malley and Paiva is going to be a very interesting fight because Paiva is someone who I struggle, and myself, to determine just how good is this guy. How good is this guy? Looking at who he's beat, he's beat Kyler Phillips. He's beat Zilas Zermagulov. He's beat Mark De La Rosa. Mark De La Rosa is, has fought at 145, I believe. So that's someone who's significantly bigger than him. Mark De La Rosa has not fought at 145. I am wrong. My bad. Anyways. I was thinking of Charles Rosa. He lost to Bonjarine and he lost to KaraFrance. And then, other than that, he's got a lot of wins over, I don't want to say nobodies, but, these things were outside of the UFC, and they were even outside of America. Sometimes when there's regional guys, I can recognize some of the regional names and kind of get a feel. But when guys are fighting regionally outside of the states, it's a lot tougher for me to recognize the level of competition they took on at the regional scene. So I'm not even sure about those guys, but what he's got in the UFC is some wins, some losses. He did some impressive things, especially in that fight with Kyler Phillips. Kyler Phillips was looking good, and Pavia, came back and eventually won that fight. And I think that is a skill that could play a major factor in this fight, especially if Sean O'Malley starts fast and lands some good shots early. Pavia is going to need that skill, and he's shown that he's got it. Now, and Sean O'Malley, on the other hand, we also don't know quite how good Sean O'Malley is. Sean O'Malley has proved to be a tremendous striker. Chito Vera was able to land a really nice leg kick that put him down, and credit to Chito Vera for that, but that doesn't take away from Sean O'Malley's entire repertoire of striking and skills he has standing. On the other hand, we haven't quite seen the ground game. And there's rumblings and there's talks that he has a very good jiu-jitsu game, and I've seen some clips of him doing some wrestling, but it's really hard to say for sure until you see those in action. But and Pavia would be the type of opponent who I think would be able to expose that if those skills were missing. Now, when it comes to predictions, I'm going to lean Sean O'Malley. With Sean O'Malley's size over Pavia, and like I said, I'm not a big range guy. There's a handful of fights where I think range could play a factor, and I think this is one of them. Sean O'Malley is someone who's a world-class striker, and he knows how to utilize range. Having such a large advantage in the range department sometimes can be meaningful if you don't know how to use it. I think Sean O'Malley is someone who can use it very well. Sean O'Malley is going to be throwing long 1-2s, hitting from a far distance out. He's probably going to throw some teeps. He's going to throw a lot of kicks like usual. He'll be able to throw some more effective leg kicks just because he can stay so far outside. So I think that Sean O'Malley is going to be able to keep Pavia at bay. And I think early Sean O'Malley is going to come out and put himself in some compromising positions. He might take it more risky. But I think that even if Pavia starts making this fight competitive, even if this becomes a super competitive fight, I think Sean O'Malley is still going to be able to win because he can always go back on the basics, the 1-2, the leg kicks, the teeps. He can do these things and really keep Pavia at bay. And if Pavia really tries to attack or commits to anything to get inside, I think Sean is going to be able to catch him. So I've got Sean knockout round 2. I think he's going to really be piecing him up and then eventually find a big finish in that second round. However, I wouldn't be surprised if the other scenario I laid out happens where Pavia is having success and Sean O'Malley kind of changes the tides, changes his game plan a little bit, and catches him coming in. So I think both of those are very real possibilities. But either way, I've got Sean O'Malley second round knockout. Now, Josh Emmett versus Dan Ige. This is a good contender for fight of the night. Anytime Dan Ige or Josh Emmett fight, you have to be thinking this could be the fight of the night. And when you put them in there together, I don't want to say it's a done deal, but Dana White might have those checks written out already. And for both of these guys, for Josh Emmett, for Dan Ige, this is an important fight in the entire landscape of that featherweight division. Both of these guys are just outside some of the big names. So there's a lot at stake here. And I'm interested to see how this plays out. And this is another fight that I am very, very 50-50 on. But I am going to lean Dan Ige just because he has been the more active fighter. I think that is going to play a role. I think that Dan Ige also has good enough grappling to where if Josh Emmett tries to wrestle with him, I think Dan Ige is going to be prepared for that. But I don't think that either guy is actually going to attempt to get this to the ground. I think this is going to be a war. And when this becomes a war, it's really hard to say which guy is going to win. You know, it's like, I don't want to say it's like picking Gaethje versus Chandler. But you've kind of got that same mindset going in where these guys are going to throw down. I think that the Gaethje and Chandler was a little bit easier to pick. But still, this is going to be a really close one. I lean Dan Ige, but to anyone that picks Josh Emmett, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Josh Emmett goes out there and gets a win. I've got it as a decision for Dan Ige. Once again, these two are going to be absolutely going to war. So if somebody crumbles, I would not be surprised if either of these guys find a finish. But when I sat down and made an official decision, I decided Ige decision. Now, one of the other fights that is incredibly interesting on this card, Dominick Cruz and Pedro Munhoz. This is another fight, once again, incredibly impactful in that bantamweight division. These guys are ranked 8 and 9. And, there isn't a lot of room to there isn't a lot of room left before you get to the top of that division. They're at 8 and 9, but 7 is Cody Garbrandt. He's going to be out of the rankings after Saturday. So the winner of this could break into like a Rob Font type fight, which would put you one win away from a Jose Aldo, and that's Aldo, a Sandhagen, a lot of options there if you can beat Rob Font. And that's if, either of these guys could get the fast pass with a good performance, especially Dominick Cruz, someone who is a UFC champion, and many consider him to be the best of all time at that weight class when he was in his prime. Now that we got the stage set a little bit, the X's and O's. This is a fight that is hard to pick because my heart is telling me to pick Dominick Cruz. That's what my heart is telling me. You go with Dominick Cruz. My mind is telling me Pedro Munhoz, and I'll explain that a little bit. I think that the leg kicks here are going to play a crucial factor in this fight. Pedro Munhoz throws great leg kicks. If you don't believe me, go watch the fight with Jimmy Rivera. He's going to be chucking leg kicks. Now, the reason that is so important is, that's important in any fight no matter who you're fighting. But it becomes something extra when you're fighting Dominick Cruz. When Dominick Cruz is known for his unique movement and his unique style of striking on the feet, by kicking the legs, that can really, really take a lot out of that. And I mean, the way Dominick Cruz fights, many people compare his footwork to a dance. The way he moves in and out, slides, and things like that. But imagine getting kicked with 15 leg kicks by Pedro Munhoz and then someone telling you, hey, go dance. It's not going to happen. And that could really stifle some of his movement. However, I think that Dominick Cruz is such a smart and intelligent fighter. I think he's going to know that. I don't think there's any piece of Dominick Cruz that doesn't expect people to come and try to crack the code to his movement. And I think the most obvious is leg kicks. Me saying Munhoz kicks the leg hard. and Cruz, and that could affect Cruz's unique style of movement. That is not an in-depth analysis. A lot of people could come to that conclusion. And I imagine Dominick Cruz is going to know that. And I imagine that he is going to be able to check some leg kicks. I imagine he has a plan to maybe catch some of those and get it to the ground and get some control time to pair with some good striking on the feet. So I lean Dominick Cruz by decision. I think the intelligence and the IQ is what is going to take him to pair with some of that unique striking and some of that wrestling ability. And then we've got fan favorite Tuivasa taking on Augusto Sakai. This is another one. This is a pick'em fight as well. Most sports books had it at like minus 115 for Sakai and Tuivasa minus 110. I think the lines were looking. And if you don't know anything about sports betting, that is about as close of a line that you will ever see in terms of pick'em fights. It's pretty much the better saying. It's pretty much the sports book saying, we don't know who's going to win. And that's not because the sports book is ignorant. It's because these two are this close. Now, I lean Tuivasa. And I lean Tuivasa because of how good he has looked in his last couple. Everyone at heavyweight has, power. But I think that the power that Tuivasa has displayed has been a little bit different, especially in his last couple fights. That fight over Greg Hardy, where he lands a really nice shot. And it might not be power. Power might be the wrong word for it. I think it's the ability to throw something with 100%, to put 100% behind something and land. I think that's what separates heavyweights, because so many of these guys have knockout power. Can you land that shot with knockout power? For example, you see the Diaz brothers and Max Holloway, I think, are both known for Tony Ferguson, I think, a little bit, not as much, where, they'll take a little bit off of it. If you see some fights with some Diaz brothers, they'll be throwing 1, 2, body, because, and they're not throwing 100%. It looks like they're holding back, and it's because they are, so they can maintain some stamina and land some shots. And I think Tuivasa is great at doing the exact opposite. So I've got Tuivasa. I think he lands a shot, and I think he puts him down. What round is that going to be? I'll predict round 1. I think the further this gets away from that first bell, I think the more likely Sakai is at winning this. Moving down, Bruno Silva and Jordan Wright. Where am I going here? I am leaning I'm leaning Bruno Silva. I almost said Jordan Wright. My apologies. But not much to say about this one. Bruno Silva has looked good as of late. Jordan Wright, I don't want to say he's looked bad, but Jordan Wright has. I'm just not as high on Jordan Wright. It's kind of hard to gauge the talent of some of these guys who haven't fought ranked opponents yet, but I've just got I really just have a feeling on this one. I'm leaning Bruno Silva. I don't really have much more to say. Moving on, Andre Muniz versus Eric Anders. Where are we going here? I've got Andre Muniz. He tapped Jacare Souza, so I think he'll be able to tap Eric Anders. That's really my thought process here. I think he gets this fight to the ground. I think he is able to take Anders down, and I think he finds a submission on the ground. What round? We'll go round 2. Because like I said, I'm not a big fan of picking fights to finish in the first round in most cases. Aaron Blanchfield versus Miranda Maverick. Where are we going here? This is another fight I'm very interested in. I think these are two of the top prospects in that women's flyweight division. And I think this is going to be a good fight. I lean Miranda Maverick. I really liked her fight with Macy Barber, and I really, really, really think she won. I think this is going to be a close competitive battle, but I'm leaning with Miranda Maverick. Moving on, Ryan Hall versus Darrick Minner. I'm going with Darrick Minner by decision. I think that Ryan Hall is kind of a one-trick pony. He didn't look great against Ila Poirier. I think if he can't work his grappling right away, not right away, if he can't work his grappling, he's going to struggle. Now, I think Darrick Minner is a good enough wrestler to prevent Ryan Hall from getting this fight on the ground. And I think if Ryan Hall can't get this fight on the ground, I don't think he can win. So I think Darrick Minner has a takedown defense and is able to keep this fight standing. I think it picks away to a decision by stopping that takedown. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Hall catches a slick submission somewhere in here because it's Ryan Hall at the end of the day. Moving on, Randy Costa versus Tony Kelly. Where are we going? I've got Randy Costa. I really, really like the way Randy Costa looked versus Adrian Yanez. Yanez is someone who many people love his boxing. I am one of those people. I'm very high on Yanez as a prospect and as a fighter. With that being said, Randy Costa had some moments in that fight where he was looking good, and I think that is going to continue. I've got Randy Costa. Let's switch it up. Let's go first round. We'll go first round knockout. I originally was going to say 2 or 3, but we'll switch it up, go first round. Randy Costa has some first round finishes already, so he's got the ability to do it. I think he gets it done against Tony Kelly. Now, the last fight we're going to talk about from UFC 269, and the opening fight of the night is Jillian Robertson and Priscilla Cachoeira. Now, I'm going to go with Jillian Robertson here. She has some very, very good submissions, and I think she's going to be able to find some of those. And even if you look at her record, which I just pulled up to make sure she does, in fact, have the submissions that I'm talking about, okay, so looking at her record, why doesn't that not say? Rear naked choke, arm bar, rear naked choke, arm bar. She's got a lot of UFC experience. But another thing, looking at this, I'm on Tapology, and she's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 grappling bouts. Albeit, she did lose 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, 5 of those. But her only win came over Caitlin Chukagian. The rest are to grapplers. Oh, there's another one. That makes her, what did I say? 6. So 6, 4. I don't know. Bad math, but she's got one more win than I said she originally did. Okay. Anyways, I think she can find a submission. She's been fighting in grappling fights. She's got UFC submissions. I think she finds a submission over Priscilla Cachoeira. Now the question is, what round? We will go round 3. Just what I'm feeling. Feeling around 3 submission for Jillian Robertson. And that ends it for the preview of UFC 269. This should be a great fight card. And, there's a lot of the line on the line for a lot of these guys. And we are obviously going to talk about UFC 269 again. And we are going to do that on Sunday. Today's Friday. You might watch this on Friday. You might watch this on Saturday. I doubt you watch it on Sunday because it is a preview. And if you watch it on Sunday, it wouldn't make much sense. Now, if you are interested in hearing the recap, which I will be doing, that will be posted on Sunday. So if you're watching this right now on Sunday, that would be strange. Just go watch the recap that I probably did. Now that we are done with that, last week I didn't record on Sunday, so we missed the Jose Aldo versus Rob Font recap. And there are usually I would just let it slide. I've missed a couple in the past where, sometimes you're just busy and can't get to it. I try to, recap every single week. Sometimes you miss. I missed this one. My apologies. But, can't let it slide. We got to get to it. Because there are a lot of things that I want to talk about. A lot of fights that I really liked. All right. So, obviously, the main event, Rob Font versus Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo is an absolute legend. He wins another one. Not only did he win, he won on 2 scorecards, 50-45. He won on 1 scorecard, 49-46. I don't know how. Listen to me. I have no idea how he didn't get a 10-8 in any round. I absolutely have no idea. It doesn't make any sense to me that somebody can get a knockdown and then have 2 minutes of ground control after they get a knockdown. Aldo probably should have walked out of there with 2 10-8s. This did happen 6 days ago, so excuse my memory. But I believe it was the 4th and 5th round where he got knockdowns and then controlled the majority of that round on the ground. What more do you want? What more do you have to do for a 10-8 than get a knockdown and control the fight after that on the ground? Doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense. I'll never understand it. So guess what? We're going to move on from it. And his performance itself, very, very good. When you look at the first round, you're like, this could go either way. But then he started landing more. And as he started landing, he started hurting Rob Font, Almost caught, 3. I think it was the second round that he stole with a knockdown. Maybe it was the first round. I can't remember. But he steals round with a knockdown. Gets 2 more. And he was beaten up Rob Font's leg. I mean, there was one sequence where he checked the leg kick and then landed one, and you could just tell at that point Rob Font's legs were done. When you're checking leg kicks, it hurts enough, and when you're piling on a Jose Aldo leg kick afterwards, changes the game. Now, what is next for both of these guys? Jose Aldo is in a really, really interesting spot, and this interesting spot all kind of comes from this interim champ. If we would have had Aljamain Sterling versus Petr Yan a couple months ago, we would have been in great shape, but now there's so many questions at the top of this 135-pound division, and I just realized I had my microphone for my headset open, so that's going to make me look goofy all episode. I'll close it now, even though it's too late. Yes, I love it when I do silly things that make this podcast look way worse. Anyways, Jose Aldo. The TJ Dillashaw fight makes sense to me. And the reason I say that, because Jose, a lot of people were saying that Dillashaw is going to sit out and get that next title fight. And myself, I was saying that, that was 100% an idea that I agreed with. However, I have changed my mind. Things change in this sport quickly. I think that Aldo versus Dillashaw makes a lot of sense. One, did Dillashaw beat Corey Sandhagen? He had a real competitive fight with him, but did he beat him? I had Sandhagen. A lot of people did. A lot of people had Dillashaw. But I think if Dillashaw beats Jose Aldo, it really, really, really gives him a strong case. It really puts aside any doubt that, hey, you guys might not have liked my fight with Sandhagen, but I just beat Jose Aldo, and you have to respect that. And you would have to respect that. The other fight that would make sense, in my opinion, is Jose Aldo versus Corey Sandhagen. Now, for Aldo, he, if he can't get that fight with TJ Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen is the next highest ranked opponent. So that fight would be interesting. I think that fight is a tremendous fight. I think Aldo versus Dillashaw is a tremendous fight. I think, all these fights at the top 5 are going to be great fights. Aldo versus Font was a really good fight. It was a little bit more one-sided than a lot of people expected. Sandhagen versus Dillashaw, great fight. Sandhagen versus Jan, great fight. If you do Jan versus Dillashaw, great fight. Jan versus Aldo, already was a great fight. Jan versus Sandhagen, was a great fight, like I said. So I think Sandhagen makes a level of sense. Corey Sandhagen also makes sense for Rob Font in the sense that they're both ranked 4 and 5 and both coming off losses. Looking at, you could also do, you're going to have Pedro Munhoz and Dominick Cruz both opened up after this one. So I think that would make a level of sense as well for the winner to take on, like a Rob Font. Now, moving on to Rafaelfaz versus Brad Riddell. Rafaelfaz, put the show out there. These two were in a great fight. Faz ends up hitting that spinning heel kick, and that'll put your lights out, and it did. Tremendous performance by Rafaelfaz. The question is, what is next for Faz? Looking ahead of Faz in the rankings, there isn't much there. He's not gonna get a fight with a lot of those guys. You've got Gregor Gillespie, and I want to say Gregor Gillespie was booked with somebody. Maybe he wasn't. I don't remember. But if Gregor Gillespie is unbooked, we will find out in 3, 2, 1. He is. Gregor Gillespie is unbooked. Book it. These two are two of the best prospects. They're ranked 10 and 11. Book it. Outside of that, if Rafaelfaz has to fight up in the rankings, you've got McGregor ahead of him. He's not getting that fight. As much as people say, oh, who would win this fight, Faz or McGregor? Oh, that'd be a cool fight. It's not going to happen. Listen real closely. We're getting real personal this one. This is the second time we've done this. Rafaelfaz and Conor McGregor will not be booked, so don't even bother speaking about it. Even though they are ranked 9th and 11th in the rankings. That fight will not happen. Get over it. Now, that fight with Dan Hooker, would that fight happen if Dan Hooker stayed at 155? That is a possibility, but it really sounds like Dan Hooker is jumping to 145 to get a breath of fresh air. From there, you've got Tony Ferguson. Could that fight happen? Maybe. But there's also a good chance Tony doesn't fight for 3 months and we don't hear a word about him, and then he comes back to fight RDA. It doesn't really matter. And then from there, if you're looking at 6 on, I don't think any of those fights happen. So I've got Faz versus Gillespie. For Brad Riddell, I don't think he should slide too far. Bobby Green makes a lot of sense. I think that would be a really fun fight. And both of those guys are, Bobby Green is probably, if you had to continue ranking outside of the top 15 at lightweight, Bobby Green is probably chilling at 16, 17, 18 range. And Green lost to Faz, and he lost to Thiago Moises. So maybe Moises makes sense in there too. I completely forgot about him. But there's a lot of guys, like we've talked about almost every episode on this podcast, there's a lot of guys at 155 that you could book to fight in that second tier of that division. Moving on. I've said that about 150 times this podcast. But moving on, Jamal Hill gets a statement win over Jimmy Cruz. Jamal Hill goes out there, lands a nice hook, right? And then, Cruz works up to his feet. What's Jamal Hill do? Goes right back to it. And then, what's he do after that? Lands a nice little ground and pound shot. Jamal Hill, 48 seconds. Let's get out of there. 50 bag bonus. Congratulations to Jamal Hill. Tremendous performance. A guy that I have been high on a while. I love seeing Jamal Hill succeed. He did so in that fight against a tough opponent in Jimmy Cruz. Jimmy Cruz is no bum. And Jamal Hill went out there and knocked him out in 48 seconds, which is a very meaningful performance when you're looking at this division. After the fight, Jamal Hill called out two people, Paulo Costa and Johnny Walker. Now, I think Paulo Costa should move to 205. I don't think that Jamal Hill would get that fight. It's not that I'm against it per se. I just don't imagine it happens. I think the UFC would rather have Costa against an Anthony Smith, a Thiago Santos, a Dominick Reyes. That's what I would imagine. I think that fight could happen in the future if they both stay in the division. I just don't think that fight happens, for Jamal Hill's next fight. However, what it did do was lay a really good, he planted a seed for a future fight. Because I think most people heard that call out and were like, probably not right now. But I don't hate that fight. I think for Jamal Hill, the other name he gave was Johnny Walker. I would argue you could push Jamal Hill a little bit higher than Johnny Walker. However, I would not be opposed to a Johnny Walker versus Jamal Hill fight. Looking at the entertainment value in that fight would be highly entertaining, and I'd love to see that fight. I think you could also book Jamal Hill against Nikita Krylov, Volkan Ozdemir, maybe even Dominick Reyes. I think there's a lot of names in that 7 to 10 range that make a lot of sense. I don't think we should push Jamal Hill, don't throw him right in there with the top 5. Let him get another one outside the top 5 first, whether that be Reyes, Ozdemir, Krylov, Walker. I think all 4 of those names make sense. He said Jamal Hill. I think that's a tremendous fight. I think if I were to pick, I think I would pick Johnny Walker. And then if he gets another knockout there, then you have a lot of options moving forward where you maybe could springboard into the top 5. Maybe you could get that Paulo Costa fight. But I think Johnny Walker is a very good next step to a lot of the very strong options and bright future of Jamal Hill. Now, we are going to skip around a little bit. Moving down to Chris Curtis versus Brendan Allen. This was a really surprising fight. Chris Curtis found himself another knockout, and Chris Curtis has done, what Chris Curtis has done is he's been given an opportunity, right? And these opportunities were not easy. He was not given, easy things to do. They said, step in on short notice, fight Phil Hawes. Tough thing to do. What's he do? Finds a knockout. They say, hey, you want to do it again? This time you're going against Brendan Allen. That's a tough task. Brendan Allen isn't an easy opponent, and Brendan Allen isn't an easy opponent on short notice. He goes out there, finds another knockout. So Chris Curtis has been given an opportunity, and he has grasped that. Grasped. Oh, good Lord. The way I pronunciate some words, you wouldn't think I had a podcast. Anyways, moving on, or not moving on, back to it. Jesus, this has gone off the rails quick. Anyways, he's probably knocking on the door of the top 15 at this point, based off a win over Hawes and a win over Brendan Allen. Brendan Allen was ranked 15th. He eventually got slid down and knocked out of the rankings, that is, and he is no longer ranked or wasn't ranked when that fight started. I think Edmund Shabazian and Chris Curtis makes a level of sense to where Chris Curtis isn't someone who is a tremendous, Chris Curtis hasn't, gone on a tear and, he hasn't been on, I don't know how to describe this. Chris Curtis isn't the best fighter that you've ever seen in your life. And that gives the UFC an opportunity to see Edmund Shabazian rebound. Edmund Shabazian is someone the UFC put a lot of work in promoting. At the same time, for Chris Curtis, if he can get a win, he gets ranked. And, what I just said, I would look back and I'd look like an idiot, and other people that doubted Chris Curtis would look like an idiot as well. So I think that is very beneficial for both Edmund Shabazian and Chris Curtis. Now, jumping around again, in the last fight we are going to talk about Manel Kape versus Zylas Zurmagomedov. Now, Cape came into the UFC. He loses to Alexander Pantoja and Mateus Nicolau. And he really turned it around. He's got 2 first-round KOs over Ode Osborne and over Zermalogov. And he is now ranked again. And this isn't something that, this career trajectory of Manel Cape isn't really what everyone was expecting. Everyone was expecting, and including myself, right? I was expecting Cape to come in and really cause some damage in that top 5 and get a title fight against, at that time, it was Deiveson Figueiredo, but I thought he was going to get a title shot, and, he lost twice, and people were saying he might get cut. He gets 2 very impressive knockouts, and now, he is ranked, and I think a fight between anyone in the top 10 to 15 range makes sense. I don't think maybe you could expand that a little bit to 8 and 9 with Nicolau. Well, he already lost to Nicolau, but you could run that back. I think that was a split decision. Matt Schnell would be a fun fight at 9. His fight got canceled today. You've got Bone Taurine. There's a lot of options for him, and I'm really not going to complain. I think he lands somewhere between 10-15. And my reasoning for that is I was surprised the UFC gave him another unranked opponent. They gave him one. I was like, wow, I'm surprised they gave him an unranked guy. They gave him a second. I was like, wow, they gave him a second one. So I don't think they're in a rush to promote Manel Cape to the top of that division. And with that being said, we're all done here. We're done here, okay? We have reached the end of the 49th episode of the Headkick KO podcast. We will be back on Sunday, however. But before I let you go, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, do all of that BS. And if you've made it this far, you might as well go follow me on Twitter and TikTok. Haven't posted a TikTok in a while. I keep forgetting. My bad. It happens. All right. Don't want to hear it. And I do still post it on Twitter quite frequently. So make sure you go and follow those 2 social media platforms. And make sure you come back on Sunday for the recap of UFC 269. We're going to talk about all the fights. We're going to talk about the implications and where these fighters are going moving forward. But most importantly, thank you for watching this episode of the Headkick KO podcast.